Good hot muggy Saturday afternoon, fellow shopkeepers and do-it-yourselfers out there in YouTube land. Today we're going to be working on this 2014 Jeep Grand Cherokee. Got the 5.7 liter hemispherical internal combustion engine, and it was puking antifreeze out, and got the cover off of it. You know, at the top it just pulls up, it locks down on little prong there and back there, and then one right there. Then you lay it over there out of the way. Then you take the air filter intake tube off, unlock it there. You got a little retainer clip there and one here, and then it comes off. Release your crank vent hose and your intake air temperature sensor, and then you got one screw that goes in it right here, a little 5/16 millimeter head. What is that, like a 6 millimeter bolt? And then take your clamp loose on your hose, and that'll come up out of there. And your radiator hose, if you're replacing the water pump, you just want to go ahead and pull the just take the two bolts out of the thermostat housing. Leave the clamp on, unless you're going to replace the hose, because your water pump comes as an assembly. And you just want to go ahead and get a thermostat while you're at it. And this upper hose, this bracket slides in that little slot there on the fan assembly. Just pull it up out of there, take it out of your way, put your 3/8 drive ratchet on your tensioner assembly right down there, and push down on the driver's side, so the bottom of the tensioner goes that way, and it'll release the tension off of the belt. I've already done it because I can't do it one-handed, but push down on it, and take your belt off your alternator and down off your idler pulley, off your water pump, and let up, and it'll come off there real easy. If your tensioner doesn't move very easy, now it's got a heavy spring pressure on it, but if it doesn't move very easy, you should probably go ahead and replace that tensioner. Then while you're at it, check your belt. This one doesn't have any cracks in it, and these belts work not just by the belt doesn't wear out in thickness here. Let's see if I can get my camera set where you can see my hand, where I can explain this. Let's say these fingers are actually the grooves on the pulley, and these fingers are the grooves in the belt. Okay, they work by friction between the ribs in the belt and the grooves in the pulley, so it drives it from friction here, not downward pressure on the belt like an OV belt. So if your belt has got a lot of groove wear really wide between the ribs of the belt, or if it's dry rotted and got a lot of cracks in it, replace it. But this belt is in good shape, so we're going to leave it. So we get the belt off. We've already got the bottom cover off. We'll go down there in a minute. For those of you that don't know, we'll show you what you got to do to get that cover off. But right here's your water pump, and let's see. You can see that slack in that bearing. It's not supposed to be like that. Anyway, we'll go underneath and take a look. Okay, I just got the front splash dam unhooked and laid over to the right because there's a screw that goes in right there, actually down on that side of this fender well splash guard, and it's broke loose and it's just spinning in there. But anyway, when it's come around and laid across there, you got a 13 millimeter head bolt there and there, and you got 3 10 millimeter head bolts that goes up in here, there, and there. And then the assembly pulls back this way and you can let it down. Here's where the other 10 millimeter head bolt goes on the driver's side. You access it from right there. There's that bolt. That's the one that is stuck in right there. So I just swung it around out of the way. No sense of fighting with it. There's your, well, that other one, I dropped it. But there's your 2 13 millimeter bolts that go in right here. And here on the driver's side, on the bottom, is your radiator drain plug. You can take it and just pull it out part way and let it drip into a pan and do a clean catch if you're going to reuse it. But this one, we drained it out, and I'm flushing it with fresh water, and then we'll put that back in. And there's a screwdriver head. I just use a pair of pliers and twist it, rotate it out counterclockwise, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. But when you go to crank that back down in there, make sure your seal is in there. It kind of locks on that fork right there. Let's see, get it to focus. It'll lock in on that fork, so when you pull it out all the way, you kind of got to pull hard. But anyway, make sure that your O-rings, there's 2 there, and I don't know that seat right there is just for tension. But don't crank that down. Just good and thumb tight is all you need. Anyway, we'll go back up to top. You know, check, make sure that your fan is rotating good, and I don't see anything else down here we need to be concerned with. And you're going to need a 16 millimeter socket or wrench, kind of a deep well. Take this loose for that bracket. Just spin that up out of the way. I think that'll be all right there. You don't have to take it off completely. 16 millimeter on your Serpentine belt tensioner. Get that loose and take that off. Get that out of the way. So if you got to replace it, it's not any extra labor. You got to take it off anyway. And check that belt or pulley. It feels good. And you need a 13 millimeter on your idler pulley. Check, make sure that pulley's good and the bearing's good. You have to take it off anyway. So if you have to replace it, it's just a parts expense only. They're probably about $15 or $20 maybe. And your engine coolant temperature sensor, to remove it, pull out on that red piece. That's your connector lock protector. When you pull it out, then you push on that tab right there, and that releases the lock, and it comes out. You have to take your coolant temperature sensor out and put it in your new pump housing assembly. Anyway, we got looks like about 7, maybe 8 bolts, 15 millimeter bolts, and then we got to take the lower radiator hose off down there. So we'll get that loose. Okay, guys, got the bolts out. There's 11 bolts that holds that in, and they're not the same length. And something I learned when I was about 4 years old. when there's a lot of parts, take your new part and then put your bolts in as you take them out where they go. Put them where they go in the new one. Then when you get the old one out, lay it up here, take the bolts and transfer them over, and then when you get your mating surface cleaned up, you set it on there. You just take one bolt out and put it in right where it goes. Now you got to take this bolt out, little 10mm head bolt comes out right there, and pull this bypass hose pipe, actually bypass pipe, out of the way so you can get to the 13mm head. I spoke earlier that these are 15s. They're 13s, not 15s. This one is a 15, this stud. So we take that stud out and put it where it goes there. But that's out of the way, and there's an O-ring on there. You should go ahead and replace that while you got it apart. But anyway, we've got all the bolts out. Get a pry bar, and don't pry against the throttle body. There's not really much of a hold there, but don't pry against the throttle body. There's typically places where you can get a hold, and like right back in here, they didn't even have that much pressure on it. But don't pry against parts that are what I want to call them, delicate, expensive, fragile, stuff that you don't need to replace unnecessarily. And anyway, hang on a minute. It's amazing what you can do with two hands. Good Lord gave us two. Had to put the phone down so I could pull that off there. Anyway, not much there to see, but right in there's the thermostat. Right there. We're fixing to put a new one in there, and we got to take the coolant temperature sensor out, so you don't want to break that. And we'll get this gasket surface cleaned up and polish it off right here on the timing chain cover and get it ready. There's no gasket material to scrape off, just oxidation and corrosion, whatnot. We'll get that polished up and start going back together. Just use a Scotch pad on there, fellas. Don't use a grinder disc. Hey, you got that timing chain cover polished off, and you can spray water in here and let fresh water come out right there. That way you're getting a good flush out of the block. And anyway, got the new water pump body up here. The new seal put in it. It only goes in one way. And push it down in there all the way into the groove, all the way around. And got the bolts transferred over into the old water pump. So we'll set this one up in there and start bolting it in. I got all them bolts in there, and you want to start them all. Get them all started before you go to tightening them down. And make sure you got them started, because they go into aluminum threads, and if you cross thread them, you got a problem, or the next guy's going to have a problem. So make sure you get them all started, and then go around and tighten them up. And I don't know what the torque specs are on them, boys. Good and tight, German torque specs. You know, just don't break them off, don't twist them off, don't strip them out. I mean, snug them up good. Maybe turn and a quarter past touching. Just get them snugged up. You got a rubber O-ring back in there to crush to create a good seal. It's not hard to do. Okay, we got the pump body bolts tight. Got the coolant temperature sensor removed from the other pump. Put a little bit of Teflon tape on there to make sure them threads seal. Push it into it, clicks, and then push in the red lock connector. And then I put the pipe in, put a new O-ring in there, and that was about a 5/8 pipe. But I just went to my, it didn't come with the new water pump, which is ridiculous. I just went to my O-ring supply, found one, and pushed it down in there and put the 10mm bolt back in and tighten it up. And the lower hose is on. I just got to pull the clamp and get it back up in place and get the tensioner put on. We'll do that right quick. And when you go to put that tensioner on there, on this side, about halfway down, it's got like a little knob sticking out, and it sets into a round recess in this water pump housing, and that indexes this so it does not turn, so it doesn't rotate on the mount or pivot on that bolt, that it pivots on its own axis for the tensioner to work properly. So make sure you got it indexed into that spot, and it's pretty obvious when you get it off there. You can see it. Well, we'll look over here at the old pumps. It sets in that little hole right there, and that keeps that from rotating. So it forces the pressure through the spring so it will tension correctly. And we got the belt back on there. Feed it down over the crankshaft. Come from the bottom, go over the top. Go around the bottom of the tensioner pulley and back across to the bottom of the alternator. And back over the top, under the idler, over the water pump, over the power steering pump, and back straight down under the AC compressor, back to the bottom of the crank pulley. But put it all on except for your alternator, and then put your bolt or your ratchet or tensioner breaker, whatever you're going to use, the 3/8 drive back down here on the bottom of the tensioner. Push the bottom that way toward the passenger side of the car, and then put it on your alternator. Make sure everything is seated good, and then go underneath your idler pulley. And there you go. Get your new thermostat, put it in there, and it has a little spitter valve right there, a little bleeder. Put that to the top so it'll let any air purge out of it as it might build up. And I already cleaned off the water neck there. Get the two 13mm head bolts, put it back in there and get them tightened up, and we'll be back with you. And once you get your hose on and you know you got your radiator drain cock down there screwed back in, but if you don't, you pour antifreeze in here, it's going to come out down there. So don't do that. So you can take off your bleeder screw right here. This one's a 6mm. The original, I think, is an 8. It's bigger, or a 5/16. 8 and a 5/16, the same thing. Anyway, you take that off and pour your antifreeze in and let the air come out of the block right there. So that's even up above the coolant temperature sensor. And so we'll start doing that. I think we're getting pretty close to full. There we go. Purging a little bit of that water out. Okay. And we'll put the plug back in. There we go. Now the cooling system is almost completely full. We just got to fill up the rest of the top of the radiator and the hose, which is not much, and get the air filter back on and get the lower splash dam on. And we got the front splash dam back on. The bolt there, a bolt there, and the other bolt right there. There in the front. And then the 2 bolts in the back. One there and one there. And fellas, those don't hold anything but just this plastic. And people putting them on with impacts and tightening them down to 79 foot-pounds and tearing them up, there's no point in that. But the oil filter access panel is probably down there at Jiffy Lube somewhere. But anyway, it's all back together and there's no leaks. And now then, before you start it, make sure you plug in your intake air temperature sensor or you'll get an engine code. Just that bolt right there goes into that bracket, and tighten your clamp here and your 2 wire straps back here that holds the air filter down, or the air filter housing. It's good and secure. After it's run, make sure that your jug is full and your cap is down tight. Put your engine cover on and you're good to go. Thank you for watching, guys. Now, as always, share, like, and subscribe if it helps you. Comments are welcome.